What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening. Hello, welcome to the Inflammation Investigator. I'm very excited to welcome Deepak Saini today to our studio to talk about his experience with inflammation with his clients. So Deepak Saini's clients hire him to solve complex health challenges, reverse biological aging, and elevate performance when others have failed. Having spent 20 successful years in the corporate world and overcoming an autoimmune condition, obesity, and a back injury, he brings a unique perspective to working with his clients. When this 4-time board certified father of 2 is not spending time with his family, he is staying at the forefront of emerging and cutting edge health research. Deepak is also a speaker, podcast host, 2-time international best-selling author, and working on becoming a centenarian. Welcome, Deepak. I'm very excited to have you here.
Yes, thank you, Liz. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm so excited that we got to meet recently in person. That's
In
fantastic.
person, even.
Yeah, in person, yes. When I got to visit you in where you live, so that was fantastic. So amazing.
Yes, very fun. And what a treat these days to actually see somebody in person when we do so much online. So, Deepak, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. As you kind of mentioned in the bio there, so 20 years corporate finance. I'm a CPA by first profession. I always struggled with my weight. I was always the chubby kid. As long as I can remember, at 18 years old, I would have been classified as morbidly obese, 100 pounds heavier than I am now. I also always struggled with an autoimmune condition. I get chronic bronchitis and ear infections and you name it when I was a kid, and that went right well into adulthood. I'd get sick for 3 to 4 weeks at a time for, basically as the seasons change, like 4 times of the year. So you think about it, it's pretty much a quarter of my year I am sick. This is pre-COVID. I'm, well enough to go to work. They just sequester me in my office with a box of Kleenex and Halls, and I just do my work. But like I couldn't work out and do anything, go out. Like I was just coughing up a lung, so to speak. But where it really came to a head was in 2014. My youngest daughter was just a baby, and I hurt my back. And I had no flexion, so I couldn't bend over at the waist. So putting on your shoes and socks is very painful. Getting in and out of a chair, which includes the toilet, is very painful. But I couldn't pick up my youngest daughter out of her crib. Couldn't pick up a 10-pound baby. Couldn't play with my older daughter, who was 3. I like to be that dad who crawls around the floor and throws them up and rough houses and that sort of thing. And I couldn't do any of that. So it was a very low place for me. I didn't recognize it myself at the time, but I certainly was in depression, not being able to do any of the activities I loved, nor be with, play with my kids. I like to say the Western medical system did me no favors. Misdiagnosis, run around through the system, ineffective treatments, et cetera. And finally, I just got fed up and said, look, I'm just going to pay out of pocket and, get testing done, imaging done. And, finally got diagnosed with degenerative disc disease in my L4, L5, L5S1. That's low back for those who don't know. And my team, my health team, that I was working with, my GP, my, physiotherapist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, et cetera, all trying to manage the symptoms, were like, well, we can't really do anything about that. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
that's unacceptable. So just I was already digging into the research of like just how to heal myself, how to feel better. I
Uh-huh.
found PRP, or platelet-rich plasma, as a treatment alternative, as well as stem cells. At the time, I don't know if it's changed any. There was only I live here in Canada. There's only one place in Canada that had sort of commercial stem cells at that time, but there
Mm-hmm.
was one place locally that did PRP. Um, so I referenced around, was able to get a referral to them, went in, and long story short, the PRP is what kind of healed my back. But that's not the
Oh.
whole story.
Uh-huh.
They told me, low back is tricky. If it was a shoulder or an ankle, like maybe one treatment, maybe two would be more than enough. That's typically what they see. Low back is tricky.
Uh-huh.
It might take 3 or 4 sessions, if you will. It ended up being 8. So that's just kind of shows the severity of the pain I was in. But that's all they told me. Like, just come in and do your, the shots, in a 4 to 6 week cycle. I was paying all out of pocket. It's not inexpensive. So I was stretching it out to every 6 weeks just to be able to afford it. Um, but again, I was doing all the research, and then I came across, what you talk about, inflammation, just in general. And I got to thinking and kind of reading the literature. And again, I'm, at this point, I'm just a CPA. I think I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. So I go back to my next appointment, which I believe was between appointment 3 and 4. If I remember
Uh-huh.
correctly. I said to the doctor, they're taking my blood, they're spinning the centrifuge, they're about to, inject me the platelets. And I said, hey, like, I'm just a layperson here. Um, am I understanding the science correctly that if I bring inflammation down systemically through my body, then this procedure should work better? That makes sense to me. That's what I'm reading. Am I understanding the literature properly? And he's like, oh, yeah, 100%. You got it. Yeah, you bring inflammation down, this will work even better, even though we're injecting at site in my back. So he must have read the expression on my face, because I was about to tear a strip off of him. Like, why didn't you tell me about like lifestyle factors, nutrition, et cetera? And he's like, hold on. He's like, I'll be honest with you, like 95, 99% of people will not change their lifestyle. They're just looking for the magic pill, whether that be pharmaceuticals, the procedure, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I like, listen, I use more choice words than I will share here, but it's like, listen, you jerk. I'm not running. I'm not golfing. I can't play with my kids. I will do everything. So that very day, I went, air quotes here for if people are listening only, cold turkey, started eating clean. And that's evolved over time, of course. But
Uh-huh.
lo and behold, just bringing inflammation down primarily through what I was eating, the nutrition, helped the procedures be more effective. Every time I'd get even a greater, recovery. Recovery took like, I mean, you have to recover from the procedure itself in the long journey of recovery. So
Uh-huh.
I recover from the PRP treatment like faster. I have greater range of motion. I was getting more range of motion every time. And I was just like, fantastic. Like, this is what I'm looking for. Like, again, my only goal was to heal my back and play with my kids. Welcome byproduct. The last 60 of the 100 pounds just melted away in a matter of months as I changed my diet to
Mm-hmm.
eating low inflammatory. And my autoimmune condition that I struggled with, that no one could ever diagnose. The last thing they thought I might have is leukemia. And thankfully I don't, but I think a lot of people who've suffered through something are almost looking for a diagnosis. At least we know what it is now. And there
Yes.
was a part of me that wanted something. Like, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's not leukemia, but we still don't know what it is. Okay, fine. But lo and behold, my autoimmune condition went into remission. For the
Uh-huh.
last 10 years, all through COVID and everything, I've not had more than like maybe a day of sniffles, or like a little sore throat for like a day or something, considering I would be sick for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. To have
Right.
like a day, like, that's a welcome trade-off. So that was my like kind of aha moment to like, whoa. And then, to make a long story short, people start asking me, like, people don't see the internal struggle, they just see the outside, the weight loss.
Right.
So
Right.
people are like, what are you doing? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, tell me more. Can I buy you a coffee? So I'm like, hey, I read this book. I listened to this podcast. This is what I learned doing my own research. And after a while, I'm just like, you know what? I can just help. My bigger mission is to help more people than working, for an energy company, with, a bunch of private equity investors who I've never seen before. So I got
Mm-hmm.
some early certifications and started working with people who are like me, weight loss, back pain. And as you mentioned in my bio, that's evolved to how I work with people now, and and what I want with my life to be, a centenarian. But that's not being in a home hooked up to tubes. That's being active in my life, playing with my great great grandchildren, God willing, and being active.
Wow, what a great story. So let me just ask you before we move on, for people who aren't familiar with PRP, what does that mean?
Right. So PRP stands for platelet-rich plasma. So plasma is a
Uh-huh.
component of our blood. So what they do is they take a whole bunch of blood from me, the subject, and they spin it in a centrifuge and isolate the platelets, which have a lot of healing antibodies and proteins and et cetera. They isolate
Hmm.
those and then they inject back. So again, if it's a shoulder or ankle, you might just get one. I have for my injury, they were putting on either side of the spine, both at that junction of L4, L5, L5S1. So I was getting 4 shots into my spine, again, using my own platelets. So that's what that looked like for me.
And then, so that's not something I've ever experienced. Is that a painful procedure?
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're piercing the skin in deep enough to then, press the vial to inject the platelets into me. So they're even though they're putting a numbing agent on my back and everything, yep, it's probably not the worst pain anyone's ever had, but it is, the first time I got used to it after a while, but the first time and they probably know this too because it was like the one and only time an additional nurse came in was basically to hold my legs down so I wouldn't like flail because it's like it
Uh-huh.
is quite painful. And again, don't forget they're injecting that site. This is the area that is super inflamed. This is the area that has damage, and
Right.
they're injecting a needle in and then releasing the platelets, which is essentially a liquid, um, into an inflamed site. And the whole point of it is to actually cause further inflammation in the short term so that you have the healing recovery period. So it is quite painful. And essentially, I couldn't drive out. Like, I'd have to get somebody to drop me off and pick me up. You can't drive after, at least not for a back one.
Right.
I'd literally try and lie in the passenger seat as flat as the passenger seat would go and try and be as flat as possible driving home.
Right. And so did that work? Like, how did that work? And what are those vertebrae looking like now in your back?
That is a great question. I've actually never done imaging since.
Uh-huh.
So my understanding is like you're never actually rebuilding. Like it's not like those discs are getting back to where they were. We've just stopped the
Hmm.
damage
Okay.
and healed the inflammatory response. And I want to be perfectly clear, it's not like a magic bullet. I dedicate, I think we might talk about this later. I dedicate upwards of 45 minutes every day to, mobility work, which includes stretching my back, keeping my core. And, core isn't just stomach, everyone. Core is like everything around. I consider core shoulders to like knees, making sure all those supporting muscles are strong so that that doesn't happen to me again. So that's part of it. So it's not just the PRP like stopped it, or again, that was a eight session process about every 6 weeks apart. So that's a number of months that this was a process,
Uh-huh.
and then the ongoing since then and for the rest of my life is to do stretching and mobility work to make sure that I keep my core strong to support the discs that are they're never going to recover. They're damaged as they're damaged, but I don't feel them anymore.
And now in your programs that you run for your clients, flexibility and exercise and mobility, those are core parts of your program. Am I correct?
Yeah, there's certainly part of it. I kind of have a methodology that I've developed. There's 5 main points. There's obviously sub points in that. Movement
Uh-huh.
as a general term is a big component of someone's lifestyle. And one component of movement is mobility and flexibility and balance. And those are all 3 different things. But yeah, that's certainly something I encourage. And and depends where everyone's situation is unique, of course. Some people need it more so than others. But I'll tell you, Elizabeth, I can't tell you how many people who are, maybe those A type who like, they do the workouts, they're doing the CrossFit, they're doing the marathons, whatever, and actually how much
Hmm.
they can benefit their health by dialing the exercise back a bit and putting more into mobility and stretching. And it's actually like a less is more
Hmm.
type of philosophy. So yeah, just try and trade off a little bit of that. because that's so important. Balance as you age, mobility, so you can do all the things you want to do as you age, and then of course stretching to so that you don't hurt yourself when you're doing the activities that you love doing, or even just like you live in Denver. I was just off camera before we hit the record button. I was just talking about how we just got a blizzard here today, so we got like all
Right.
this fresh snow on top of ice. Right. So these are the moments. This is what the whole year of training is about, is like being able to walk on ice, taking your dog for a walk so you don't slip. And then if you should, lose it, how you have the balance so you don't actually fall. Right. So, it's kind of like training for, this few weeks of the winter when it's really, really bad.
Or so that you don't drop dead of a heart attack while you're shoveling, right?
Another very good point. Absolutely. 100%.
One of my high school friends, that happened to his father. It was very
Mm,
tragic.
that is tragic. Yeah.
So that's a good segue into explain a little bit about what your methodology, what your programs are all about. You mentioned there were 5 pillars.
Correct. Yeah. So I have a methodology I've developed. The acronym is called TIME, TIIME. So T stands for testing. So I do very robust testing, DNA, microbiome, metabolites, biological age, blood work, hormones if necessary or required. The first I stands for what I call inner game. So that's really that emotional component. So
Hmm.
I'm a master practitioner in timeline therapy, neurolinguistic programming, and hypnosis. So while we're waiting for the test results to come in, I really like to work with those patterns that we've developed over time, or even that we inherited from previous generations, from our parents, even further back. So that again, it's not like we're never going to have these emotional responses. It's not like we're never going to be angry or sad, but it's how we respond to that old stimuli in a different way. We like to say, you can't do your problem the same way anymore. So once those negative emotions and limiting beliefs have been dissipated or weakened, um, you show up a lot different in your life, in your relationships, but also you adhere to any program better. So any workout, movement plan we develop, any new nutrition, any new lifestyle habits will be adhered to a lot better when you don't have these old patterns. So that's
Uh,
that's the first eye. Then the second eye is implementation. So the test results come in. I think one of my superpowers is taking vast amount, hundreds of pages of data, and I always encourage my clients read through it all, but most people are too busy, and boil it
uh,
down to like these are the 2 or 3 pages of these are the highlights, and then here's the roadmap. Here's the implementation plan for the rest of the year. This is a year-long program. And here's the
uh,
first 3 or 5 things we should work on. And I rank them. And here's the next 5, because no one's going to do 20 new things at once. That's impossible.
right,
Right.
right.
So if we can get 2 or 3 new habits in, maybe 5, build that over 3, 4 months. Great. Let's add in a couple more things. It can be as simple as someone takes no supplements whatsoever. Well, you're actually deficient in XYZ. Let's just get you taking those 3 things. That's one new habit, is taking 3 new supplements, whatever it is. It's
Right.
gonna, right. And then the M is mastermind retreats. So again, I tend to work with kind of high performers, founders, executives, that sort of thing. So
Uh,
people are used to masterminding, talking business. So this is a health coaching program, obviously, but I take all my clients, past, current, and top prospects, away for a nice, fun little weekend. And it is a business retreat, so to speak. People have hot seats. They talk about challenges in their business. But the twist is, we go, and I have partnerships all around the world. We go to somewhere where I have a partner clinic that does regenerative medicine. And so while we're masterminding in a boardroom talking about our businesses, we might be hooked up to an exosomes IV, or maybe do a stem cell protocol or a peptide protocol, or it changes all the time. So it's a little fun little getaway to actually work on some one of these cutting edge things that we have in science and technology now for our health. And then the E in time is evaluation. So we retest certain markers. Biological age is one that we definitely retest. And if people do the work, they do the inner game work, they follow the protocols for their lifestyle. I've yet to have a person who hasn't reduced their biological age, and most people do at least 10 years or more over the course of the year. So that's at a very high level, kind of what the program looks like, or my methodology looks like.
that's that sounds like a lot, and it sounds like you break it down into pieces that people can actually wrap their heads around and implement, which is maybe I would say, one of the key factors in whether people experience recovery when they go into a program. Would
100%
you agree?
accountability is huge. So the accountability is part of that implementation piece, right? I meet with people every week. It might just be quick, like, hey, how's it going? Check in. Are we still doing this? All good. And sometimes it's more in depth. Challenges come
Mm-hmm.
up. A challenge at work and in the family situation, and it might be a talking to. They might just need to vent. They just might need to talk it out, and it's totally up to them. And then also, again, I have a very high touch point with my clients kind of program, and even in between those weekly sessions, quite often daily or every second day, people just like, shoot me a text like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or like, hey, I did the thing, or I signed up for the race, or whatever their thing is, and it's like great, and I'm just like their cheerleader all the way along for the whole year. Because granted, it's great having the knowledge, and it's even great having the plan, but life is messy, as we all know, and having that, I like to say, Deepak's your cheerleader in your back pocket. And that accountability is the huge thing, because everyone, myself included, we've tried things and then gave them up after a certain amount of time. And sometimes it just doesn't resonate, and other times it does. But yeah, there's just a lot of friction there. So try and remove that friction for people.
What do you find is the biggest challenge for your clients? Is it physical or emotional or something else?
I would say it is emotional. And, as you're well aware, Elizabeth, and probably a lot of your listeners are, that, like to say, the body keeps the score, right? So those trapped
Right.
emotions, they are aging us faster. Some people more rapidly than others. I tend to work with more men. I mean, I do work with women as well, but it tends to be more men than often than not. And they think they have it all down, or they've been conditioned. Um, Again, depends of a certain age or generational, but men have been
Mm-hmm.
conditioned to be the strong, stoic one, and we take care of our family, we take care of our business, and we're not going to deal with that. Boys don't cry, like all these sorts of things we've heard. And how often, once we actually do that, and sometimes they're quite hesitant and like, okay, I understand, I paid for it as part of the program, I don't really want to do it. And sometimes it takes some coaxing, but once they do it, they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize this caused that, or this, this emotion came up for me, or this memory came up that I don't even really recognize. And it's, they start to make the correlation. So I would say it's emotional for sure. Most men, and not everyone, right, but most men know how to,
Mm-hmm.
whether they do it or not, or even know how to do it properly. Most men know how to exercise, right? And movement is a big piece. Now, do they know the balance and do they know the recovery? No, not necessarily. But to answer your original question, it's usually the emotional piece is the biggest like aha for them, because that also translates not only to their physical health and even business results, but the emotional, their relationships with their partners, with their kids. That's oftentimes the biggest aha that I get. Deepak, this was all great and I love the results, but like, man, like I have such a better relationship with my wife now, or my kids,
Uh,
or my parents, because we did that work, and I'm showing up different, right? They can't do their problem the same way anymore. They show up different, and that's huge.
it's very interesting to me because that's not something we talk about in our conventional healthcare system very much. We relegate emotions and stress and things like that to the psychiatric realm, completely separate from the physical realm of caring for you. So if you go in to see your regular Western medical doctor in your 15-minute appointment, you're really not going to be able to get into any of those emotional triggers, and they're not even going to delve or look for them because that's not how they're trained and that's not how the whole paradigm is in Western medicine. But I think what we're seeing now more and more is how intrinsically connected that internal realm is with the physical manifestations of your health.
100%, Elizabeth. I like to say, there's no physical health and mental health. There's just health, right?
Right.
There's no head and body. There's no mind and body. It's just you, whatever you want to call it. There's just one. So it has to be worked in conjunction. And even if we just want to talk, I'm air quoting here, the physical component, right? Like the heart doctor doesn't necessarily talk to the kidney doctor, doesn't necessarily talk to the soul doctor, and they work in silos. And then it's getting better. I wish it would accelerate that openness, and we're not quite there yet. And certainly, there's specialists and functional medicine doctors, and et cetera, that are doing this type of work. But we can't segregate the physical and mental health. It is one. It is one together. So Yeah, if the system worked perfectly, there would be no need for Deepak, right?
Or maybe it should be that everyone, as part of their healthcare maintenance, should have someone like Deepak who
Absolutely.
can delve into this and help you with those pieces that you're not getting from your regular doctors.
Yeah. Elizabeth, it just reminds me of a story. If I can I share a quick story?
Please,
Yeah,
please.
so this was during COVID, and I was really debating about like whether I should get one of these shots from one of the manufacturers.
Uh-huh.
So of course I have all my own data. I'm doing all this research, so I call up my doc, and of course it's just a video or sorry telephone consult because there's no in person at this point
Right.
where I live. And I said, look, here's a bunch of markers that tell me that getting the shot, any one of the shots based on some of the side effects that are being listed or explored here, would actually put me at greater risk to actually taking the shot. But on the other hand, with some of my markers and some of my risk factors for cardiovascular health and stuff, if I should get like a severe strain of COVID or form of COVID, would put me at more risk if I don't have the shot. So I don't know which way to go here. Like, what is the right? And he said, Deepak, like you've done way more information research than I know. I don't even know what you're talking about here. Like he basically had no answer for me. So then I said, okay, I still got 5 minutes of your time, right? So here's some research I'm seeing about certain peptide protocols that could be and maybe in a replacement. If you should get, if you choose not to get the shot and you should get COVID, this might work. Like, and he's like, Deepak, I don't know anything about peptides, and I applaud you for researching and being on top of it. And I was like, and even though I got no answers, I was appreciative that he and most doctors are not like this, and I'm maybe painting with a broad brusher, but most general P's are not GPs are not going to be so forthright and saying, "Hey, you know more than me. I can't help you." And I
Mhm.
appreciate that about him. That's actually why he's my doctor. Um, but it just kind of goes to the like you said earlier, the training. What can they say, even if they know because they've done their homework? They're actually, depending on jurisdiction, they can't actually tell you about things because it's outside scope of what they can actually say. Even when I was looking about nutrition, at least where I live, the doctor can't talk about nutrition. You got to go see a registered dietitian. There's a segregation here. Like, okay, now I got to, so it,
Yes.
I hope it improves is basically what I'm trying to say over time.
Yes. And honestly, and a registered dietitian is trained to create meal plans in large health facilities like a hospital or a long-term care center or a senior center, things like that. They're not necessarily trained to help with personalized nutrition. That's not
100%.
part of their training. So, and again, they're like siloed in there and the scope. I broke my, what did I break? My foot recently. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go back to the orthopedist that I saw when I broke my arm a couple years before. And I call up the office and I say, okay, well, I'd like to see the same orthopedic surgeon that I saw before when I broke my arm. And they said, oh, he doesn't do feet. I'm like, what? He's not like a bone doctor? They're like, no, there's an arm guy and there's a foot guy. They're different.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that's highly, highly siloed and specialized. Okay, so what do you think is the most important thing people don't understand about their health?
I would say, and, I'm sure you've talked about this many times on your podcast, is just the various forms of inflammation. I think people are becoming more aware of what inflammation means, number one.
Hmm.
Maybe, oh, here's some supplements or medications or whatever that brings inflammation down. I think because there's a whole industry to sell you stuff about that. So
Right,
people kind of know
right.
that. But these hidden sources of inflammation. So for me, I think, and, maybe you have a different opinion as with that. I think our nutrition, what we put in our bodies is the number one form of inflammation we're bringing upon ourselves. What we eat or drink. That certainly was my case. I certainly see with most of my clients. But there's other things too, right? Like, the chemicals we're bringing into our home, whether we're eating or ingesting them, that's a whole different story. But just like, that we're surrounding ourselves with, like, are you bringing like dry cleaning into your home? Are you letting it, air out and, somewhere else, all these chemicals that are in carpet and furniture and all these sorts of things. Then there's obviously too much sun exposure, and like I'm all for sun exposure, smart sun exposure, right? I don't wear sunscreen or anything like that. I'm smart with the sun, but too much of it, that is inflammation, that will cause inflammation. Even non-native electromagnetic fields, right? We're surrounded by devices and computers all the time. That causes inflammation. And people don't think I don't really feel any symptoms from this, and like, yeah, maybe you don't. Twofold on that. One, you might not recognize them as symptoms. That's number
Right.
one.
Right.
And number two, maybe you don't get anything, but I was like to say it's the little paper cuts, right? The nutrition maybe doesn't get you, but maybe that doesn't, the EMFs doesn't get you, and the chemicals you bring to your house, and the dry cleaning, and the carpet cleaner, and the toilet bowl cleaner, right? These are all just tiny little paper cups, and none of them are just killing you, but they're all add those all up over thousands and thousands of little paper cuts, excuse me. It all adds up to next thing you know, it's 10 years later and you feel like crap, or you actually have now symptoms, or your labs are all out of whack, or whatever the case may be. It can show itself so many times. So I think that's the number one thing people don't realize is these hidden sources of inflammatory stress.
Back in 2014, when I closed out my TEDx talk, that is actually the final thing I left people with, was that nobody is watching out for you. Nobody is connecting all these exposures to everything that's going on in your body, or seeing if you have over recommended amounts of anything, whether it's food dyes or chemicals, or even those kinds of off gases that we experience from the little things that we're bringing in, like the new carpet that we just got installed or something like that. You have to really be aware for yourself of all of these little exposures and how they cumulatively add up and can affect your health. So thank
Yeah,
you for bringing that up.
yeah, 100%. I just want one more thing on that. People
Mm-hmm.
might read a label or look something up. It's like, oh, this is, generally accepted as safe, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's good for you, right? But okay, but what they don't realize is even if it was tested by some government body, and sometimes it's not, sometimes it's like they rely on the manufacturer to do the testing, which is, the fox watching the hen house type of thing.
Right,
But
right,
even if it is by the government or some actually independent third party, we have to realize we are complex systems, our bodies. So they tested one thing against one variable. We are not one thing, one variable. We are like
right.
thousands of variables running around every second of our life. So did they test the this food dye versus the versus EMFs, or versus this food dye versus whatever? No, they're not doing this testing 100%. And if they are doing even the one variables they are testing, 3 months, maybe a year, right? We're not doing decades of long stay. And I understand this is all expensive and type of thing, but I just want people to be aware. Like, we all have to make our own decision. There's a risk reward of every decision we make, but you can't rely on, which is really just poor data, really.
Right. Well, the data is not there because who's going to profit from doing that kind of testing? Nobody, except for you,
Nobody.
but
Yeah.
that's not a financial profit. It is in terms of your life, but in terms of doing those large scale phase 3 trials, the companies that put out these chemicals and these products certainly aren't going to invest in these kinds of long-term trials that might show that their products are actually not healthy. And just recently, I saw um, a study, and this is such a small alert that should be huge, that showed that the original tests for glyphosate, which is what they use in Roundup and what they use in a lot of our crops in the US, were flawed. And they were conducted by Monsanto itself, who is the producer of glyphosate. I always mispronounce this. And this is contaminated pretty much 100% of the wheat crops, especially, and many, many other crops in the US. And we wonder why so many people are gluten intolerant now, and maybe they're actually glyphosate intolerant. And this little itty bitty alert that said, oh, by the way, those original studies that said it was safe were flawed, and they were put out by the company. So there was an inherent conflict of interest, and it is, in fact, not safe. So, exactly what we're talking
Yeah.
about. It's
100%.
buyer beware. You have to educate yourself. You're the only one who's looking out for your own best interests.
Yeah. Another thing, we don't have to keep dwelling on this topic, but again, like pesticides, whatever, like, okay, this is meant to kill another living thing. Yes, we are not spraying it in our mouth or on our head or whatever. We're spraying it on the garden or whatever to kill some sort of pest, insect, whatever. But like repeated exposure year after year, season after season, this all adds up. You think, oh, it's just a little here on this anthill or whatever the case may be. It's like that's just repeated over and over, and we don't realize it. Now they do testing, and the autopsy testing or umbilical, blood core testing, like all these chemicals in newborns and in mother's milk and everything. It's just like, it's the genie's out of the bottle. And I think really just we need to advocate for ourselves is kind of the message I want to say, and whatever that looks like, and for the individual.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's wrap this up. And how can people get in touch with you? And what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, I'm all over the socials except TikTok. I have not done TikTok yet, but I'm all, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I'm probably the most active on. I certainly have my website, deepaksainihealth.com. I'm sure you'll have all the links there. But yeah, just connect with me, send me a wave, say a hi if you like my messaging or what I'm sharing. And I try and mix it up, not only for, again, I typically tend to work with high performers, not only messaging to them, but to the everyday person as well. Some easy tips to like maybe one or two things you can pull into your own life to start to that journey for you as well. So quite a range of things that I share. And yeah, and I always encourage people too, if you want me to talk about something, let me know. I'll figure out a way to make some content around something that you are struggling with or you want to know more about.
Did you want to share your finding your path to health?
Yeah, that's a great downloadable guide for people as well. I think we've actually just changed the name, so that might not be the. It'll be the. I'll send you a new link for that. I essentially I'll just highlight for. I'll have a guide. It's really kind of just contrasting. And again, we kind of alluded to it earlier. Well, we can't always trust doctors, but at the same time, we can't always just trust our gut either, or intuition, if you will. And some people kind of lean one way or the other. Like I'm 100% like that guy went whatever. He's white lab coat. He's the authority. Other people have totally dismissed that. And they're like, no, I'm just going to, what I feel, very intuitive. Those are two extremes. And I'm actually making the case like neither of those are right. It's somewhere in the middle. And it's just a short little, guide to lead people to what a right decision might be for them. So we'll make sure we get to the right one. I think we actually changed the URL since I signed up to be on the podcast. So we'll make sure everything's there for you.
Yep, it'll be in the show notes for people who are looking for it. And otherwise, they can find you at deepaksaini.com. Is that your website?
deepaksainihealth.com.
deepaksainihealth.com. Do you want to spell your name just in case?
Sure. DeepakSaini, Deepak Saini, and then health.com.
Excellent. Any final words you want to add in before we close this up?
I really appreciate the opportunity. Again, it was fantastic meeting you in person. I know we had a really great conversation when I was visiting Denver. And I just really encourage people to, whatever it looks like for you, no one has to do what I do. Nobody has to do what you do, Elizabeth, for our health. But, whatever that next step is for you, we're all on our own journey. Just take that next step. It could be starting to walk more. It could be taking something out of your diet. Could be whatever it is. Whatever's right for you, just take that next step to improve your health.
Great words of wisdom to live by. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. If you've liked what you've listened to and heard today, please like, rate, review. All those things really help new podcasts like this one. And I will look forward to connecting with you the next time. Thanks for joining us. And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell, or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations. They work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your inflammation investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.